hours, we're talking mere hours, after Zoran Mamdani delivered his victory speech.
And it was less a speech about unity.
Oh, much less. It felt more like a declaration of economic war, a war on job creators. And the market, it just didn't wait. Capital didn't hesitate.
Not for a second.
By sunrise, you had commercial leases being torn up, moving trucks were already being loaded. I mean, the speed of the reaction was just astonishing.
And the real tragedy here, the thing we have to focus on, is that the price of this political aggression, it's not being paid by the billionaires Mamdani was attacking.
No, it's being paid by the workers.
Yeah.
The people whose paychecks just vanished, literally overnight. So the question is, how could one politician's rhetoric, just words, trigger this immediate panicked financial reaction? An estimated $8.7 billion in capital flight.
It's an incredible figure.
We're going to uncover the full story of the New York exodus. Stay with us as we break this down in our in-depth discussion right here on News Focus Podcast. And if you find our reporting valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to support our channel. We truly appreciate it. Okay, so we have to start right there. On that stage, the lights, the cameras, the now infamous victory speech.
Right, because the sources we've looked at, they don't frame this as a celebration at all.
No, it's the opposite. They call it a declaration of war, an economic war against anyone perceived to be standing in the way of this radical new agenda.
And that's the key to understanding the instantaneous reaction. You know, a victory speech is normally a call for unity.
Or at least, a pragmatic, let's work together kind of message.
Exactly. This was the inverse. The sources describe him standing there, fist literally clenched, and just targeting specific groups.
Landlords, entrepreneurs, large businesses.
The very engines that have powered the city's tax base for decades.
He made it so clear who the enemy was. He even called out President Trump by name. We have the quote right here, and it's pretty provocative.
It is.
He said, quote, "Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn up the volume."
Wow. I mean, turn up the volume.
That's not governance. That is pure provocation.
And that single moment, it really just encapsulated the entire strategy. You have to look at the contrast. The sources are pointing to a strong national economy, being steered by President Trump.
Right.
And Mamdani's move was to basically say, we're opting out. He was signaling that New York City was leaving that national consensus on growth and adopting this explicitly punitive stance against capital.
So what was the goal there? What's the political objective in painting such a huge target on your own city?
Well, the analysis we've seen suggests it's about consolidating power through division. He promised to, and this is another quote, end corruption by taxing and regulating them into oblivion.
Them being the success.
Exactly. He defined success as corruption. And that energizes his base, it creates a political villain. But the problem is, that villain, the successful entrepreneur, the large property owner.
That's the person who pays the city's bills.
And employs its residents. So while the rhetoric sounds, revolutionary and exciting to his supporters,
the practical implication for the average New Yorker is, frankly, terrifying.
It leads to an immediate and a profound breakdown of trust. The trust between the government and the job creators. And this is why the sources we've looked at call the speech a manifesto.
Not a celebration.
Not at all. A manifesto for a change driven by resentment. And here's the critical economic reality that gets missed in all the cheering.
What's that?
The people in the crowd cheering for Mamdani are very often the same people employed by the businesses he's demonizing.
So when an investor or a CFO hears the incoming mayor promise to tax them into oblivion,
they don't stick around to see what that looks like. They don't wait for the bill to arrive. They start looking at other states. They initiate the process of what's called capital mobility.
Because capital isn't tied down. Unlike the voters, capital can just get up and leave. It goes where it's treated best.
Precisely. And Mamdani just sent the strongest possible signal that New York is no longer that place. You don't get to declare economic war on job creators and then, expect them to stick around out of some sense of civic loyalty.
Loyalty is an emotion. Capital is a resource.
And it follows predictable economic incentives. The markets reacted to the intent of that speech, not the sound of the applause.
And that intent, it translated almost immediately into his policy proposals.
Yeah.
What critics are calling the socialist playbook disguised as policy.
Yeah, he laid out a list that on the surface sounded utopian.
Free buses.
Frozen rents.
Massively expanded labor power.
And even, city-run grocery stores.
Each one of those is cloaked in this language of compassion, of equity. It promises a whole new social safety net.
But the moment You scratch beneath that surface, you hit the hard mathematics, infrastructure, budgets, operational costs.
Which brings us to the one question that seems to be completely ignored.
The essential question.
Who is paying for all this stuff?
The money has to come from somewhere. And this is the core contradiction. He promised all these massive new social programs while simultaneously promising to drive out the only high-earning demographic capable of actually funding them.
So who does the bill fall on?
The sources are crystal clear on this. It's not the career activists. It falls squarely on the existing tax base.
Meaning small business owners.
Mid-sized companies already struggling, and a property tax base that is, as we're seeing, about to shrink dramatically.
This collision between the utopian promise and the fiscal reality. That's where this crisis was born.
It is. Right on that stage.
Okay, let's really dedicate some time to breaking down these policies one by one. Because the financial flaws are so immediate, they're what triggered this whole exodus. We have to start with the rent freeze. On its face, freezing rents sounds like a good thing. It sounds compassionate, right? A vital way to stop people from being displaced.
It always sounds that way. That's the political genius of it. But the economic decay cycle that follows is it's universally predictable. We've seen this movie before in other cities.
So what happens? What's the cycle?
When you freeze rents, you are functionally setting the maximum return on your investment to near zero.
Or even less than zero.
Often, yes, below the actual cost of just maintaining the property. Now, for a huge institutional landlord, maybe that's an annoyance they can absorb for a while.
But for the small-time property owner?
It's catastrophic. The person who owns one or two buildings, who relies on those small incremental rent increases to pay for a new roof or a boiler replacement, they're wiped out.
So if the landlord can't raise their rent to cover rising costs?
They stop investing. It's simple logic. Deferred maintenance becomes the new normal. So instead of protecting tenants, the policy actually incentivizes the physical degradation of their homes.
The source material had a really powerful phrase for this. It called it controlled demolition distressed as progress.
That's it exactly. The building doesn't burn down overnight. It slowly falls into disrepair. Then vacancy rates start to rise because the units become undesirable.
And I assume that hits the city's tax revenue.
Massively. The city loses millions in taxable property value because the value of a building is directly linked to the revenue it can legally generate.
And this must create a secondary problem too, right? It must accelerate the housing crisis because if existing property is unprofitable,
no one builds new property.
right.
That's the critical long-term consequence. Why would any developer commit, hundreds of millions of dollars to build new housing, especially affordable housing, which already has razor-thin margins?
When the government has shown it's willing to just retroactively confiscate their revenue stream with an arbitrary freeze.
You wouldn't. So new development just dries up, the housing supply shrinks, the existing housing gets older and less safe, and the crisis of affordability, ironically, gets worse for everyone.
It sounds like a policy that ends up bankrupting the middle-class immigrant who owns a small building.
Yes, often the very people the policy is supposedly designed to help.
While huge, wealthy institutional funds can just ride it out or convert their properties to something else.
That's the tragic fallout. The people being protected end up with worse living conditions, and the people being politically targeted, the wealthy, have the financial flexibility to just divest and move their capital somewhere else.
Okay, let's pivot to the second massive financial promise Mamdani made, this free bus revolution. Mobility is a right.
It's a great slogan, but it completely ignores the catastrophic financial state of the MTA. The numbers here are they're alarming.
They are staggering. The MTA is the lifeline of the city, and it is currently staggering under $48 billion in debt.
Billion with a B.
With the B. And that debt wasn't accrued overnight. It's decades of huge capital projects, pension obligations, operational creep.
And a huge chunk of their operating budget comes directly from fares, right? A very significant portion, yes. It's a dedicated revenue stream they rely on to keep the lights on day to day.
So if you just eliminate all fares, make the service completely free, how big a hole does that blow in the budget, and what happens next?
You are eliminating billions of dollars in annual operating revenue instantly.
Just gone.
Gone. Billions that are needed just for daily operations and basic maintenance, not even touching that huge capital debt. So when you layer a free fare for everyone policy on top of a $48 billion deficit, You don't create a utopia, you accelerate a collapse.
It's like taking a boat that's already sinking and deciding to drill a few more holes so the passengers can swim for free.
That's a powerful analogy, and it's accurate. The sources we looked at lay out the direct consequences. First, the MTA's bond ratings would immediately get hammered.
Meaning it gets more expensive to borrow money for future repairs.
Exponentially more expensive, yes. And second, that lost fare revenue has to be replaced from somewhere. It forces a massive transfer of funds from other critical city budgets.
And that money disappears from where? Schools, police.
It disappears from infrastructure budgets, from police funding, from schools. Yes. The administration is promising a higher quality of service while simultaneously destroying the very funding model for that service.
So what's the end game?
The transit system will inevitably start to fail under the weight of debt, maintenance failures, and just sheer overcrowding, because free service always encourages more usage without adding more capacity.
And then the administration will just blame the rich.
Predictably, they'll demand even more extraction from a shrinking base, and the whole cycle starts over again.
The analysts we reviewed, they call this mindset entitlement economics. And it seems to connect to these broader cultural trends we're seeing.
It really does. It's a mindset that institutionalizes this belief that you shouldn't have to earn what you use, that you shouldn't have to contribute to the services you rely on.
And you see this in other areas, like in labor discussions, where some entry-level workers are demanding pay equal to management.
Or in protests where groups claim that corporations just owe them things, reparations, services, whatever it may be. Mamdani's platform isn't just about public service.
No, it's framing those services and the money to pay for them as a right that is owed by the successful rather than a shared responsibility.
Exactly. And that way of thinking, it destroys the very things that lead to long-term economic progress.
Ambition.
Personal responsibility.
The work ethic that built the city in the first place.
If the government is promising you a utopia that's funded entirely by punishing someone else's success, why would you strive for that success yourself, especially when that success is now publicly demonized?
You're creating a system, as the critics framed it, where the producers are punished.
And the bureaucrats, the people who just redistribute the increasingly scarce wealth, they're empowered.
And investors, CFOs, they're not waiting around for that system to fully materialize.
No, they're not. The second Mamdani gave that speech, the market got a clear, negative signal about the future of New York. The smart money saw the math screaming collapse, and they initiated their exit strategy.
And the sheer speed of that response is what's so critical here. This wasn't a slow burn decline. This was an immediate reversal of investment plans.
Right.
Which brings us to this quiet exodus that started happening behind the scenes, literally overnight.
Yes. While the cameras were all focused on the rallies and the celebrations, business owners were on the phone with their commercial leasing agents, with their accountants.
The sources described this sudden, just chilling silence in major real estate negotiations.
That's one of the first tangible signs. Leasing agents reported that deals that were days, maybe hours from being signed, were suddenly put on hold indefinitely.
And brokers started getting calls from companies looking to get out fast.
Exactly. Mid-sized companies needing to sublet huge office spaces, even at a loss, because their leadership had already made the decision. They wanted to pull the plug immediately, before the new administration could even cement the new regulations.
Who is actually packing up and leaving? Is this just a Wall Street thing, or is it broader than that?
It's the entire business ecosystem. That's what makes the impact so widespread and so devastating.
So not just finance.
Not at all. We're talking logistics firms that move goods in and out of the ports. We're talking boutique manufacturing facilities that have really tight margins, and scores of restaurant owners
Who are already just barely hanging on after the pandemic.
barely surviving. They can't absorb another tax hike. They can't absorb a rent freeze mandate. The message from all these different sectors was remarkably consistent.
Which was?
If New York has voted to punish prosperity, we are moving our operations to a place that rewards it.
And we have actual data on this. This isn't just anecdotal. We have a number that quantifies the financial hemorrhaging that started right after that speech.
We do, and this is the definitive proof of the panic. Business associations, the ones involved in finance and trade, they estimated that over $8.7 billion in private capital was immediately redirected or frozen.
$8.7 billion since his election night.
Let's put that in perspective for a moment. That is money that would have flowed into new development projects,
Job creation.
local supply chains, and, crucially, high tax revenue for the city. It's capital that just, poof. evaporated from the local economy.
And where did it go? Where is that capital landing now?
Predictably, it's going to environments that offer regulatory stability and lower taxes. The primary destinations cited in the sources are Florida, Texas, and Tennessee.
So states that are actively marketing themselves as the opposite of what Mamdani is offering.
They're marketing themselves as havens for free enterprise and reliable governance. It's capitalism defending itself, really. It's just shifting resources to where they are respected and protected.
We have to connect this massive, $8.7 billion number to the human cost.
The layoffs.
Yeah, Mamdani ran on building a worker's paradise. But what happens when the employers who write the paychecks all flee the zip code?
The irony is it's tragically self-evident. When Mamdani attacks the quote-unquote billionaire landlords, he creates this massive collateral damage.
How so?
Well, when a commercial lease is broken and that logistics firm relocates to Miami, it's not just the landlord's income that's affected.
Right.
It's the administrative staff who lose their jobs, the delivery drivers, the local catering company that supplied their lunches, the janitorial service. They all lose their contracts or their jobs.
So that $8.7 billion isn't just a number, it has a ripple effect.
A huge one. Economists call it the multiplier effect. Every dollar of investment that leaves generates these secondary and tertiary layoffs across the service and support sectors.
And the sources are projecting that this initial capital flight will lead to thousands of indirect job losses.
Absolutely. You cannot sustain social programs or high employment when you punish the producers and collapse the tax base. The very social safety net that Mamdani promised to expand is going to start to fray.
Because the funding routes are empty.
They're completely empty.
This whole scenario, the rhetoric, the capital flight, the impending collapse.
Yeah.
It feels painfully familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Critics are drawing a very explicit line to the California exodus we've been seeing for the last decade.
They are, and the parallels are, they're inescapable. The blueprint Mamdani is using in Manhattan is the same one that hollowed out huge parts of California's economic base.
We've all seen the high-profile examples.
Yeah.
Elon Musk moving Tesla to Texas.
Joe Rogan taking his entire studio and business to Austin, the Daily Wire leaving for Tennessee.
And the point is, those weren't just isolated incidents. They were signals.
Exactly. They signaled a mass movement of hundreds of smaller ancillary firms that followed them, draining billions upon billions in taxable income from California.
So what you're saying is, Mamdani is importing a known failure, a blueprint that has already been proven to be destructive, and he's bringing it straight into the heart of Manhattan.
It's self-sabotage, but it's being disguised as a revolution. The sources conclude he's intentionally draining the billions in taxable income that New York desperately needs just to service its existing debt and population.
The warning lights were flashing bright red from California's experience.
But Mamdani's coalition seems determined to just ignore them and repeat the mistake.
Now, a huge part of his appeal, the reason those crowds were cheering so loudly, was the narrative around his background. Let's talk about how that narrative is starting to unravel under the glare of this economic reality.
The initial packaging was, you have to admit, politically masterful.
The immigrant hero story.
Right, the son of Ugandan refugees. It symbolized inclusion, diversity, hope. He was presented as the embodiment of the New York dream achieved through struggle, and the media absolutely embraced that narrative.
It's a great story, until the policies attached to the story start to destroy the economic ladders for everybody else.
And that's exactly why the narrative is unraveling, because when your policies are actively destroying opportunity and job stability, it suddenly becomes irrelevant where you came from.
You're killing the very dream you claim to represent.
The very dream that brought immigrants, including his own parents, to this country in the first place. The sources note that the so-called immigrant hero has very rapidly become the face of economic regression.
He didn't unite the city.
He polarized it between those who want to build and those who want to control.
And for a lot of his early supporters, there has to be this harsh realization setting in.
Which is?
That representation, whether it's ethnic, ideological, whatever, it means absolutely nothing if your paycheck disappears.
It shatters what you might call the identity shield. The myth of Mamdani, the compassionate reformer, is giving way to the reality of Mamdani, the radical ideologue.
And once that mask slips, people have to start confronting basic questions of competence.
Which leads us directly to that astonishing political gaffe he made regarding international law. It really should have been a massive red flag for everyone.
This was a truly jaw-dropping moment from his campaign. It got dismissed pretty quickly at the time, but it speaks volumes about his judgment and his grasp of how government actually works.
It really does.
He publicly stated that he would personally arrest Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, if he ever set foot in New York City.
It's a spectacular, almost unbelievable confusion of jurisdictions. You have the head of a municipal government,
A mayor.
a mayor, claiming he would arrest a sitting head of a foreign state on American soil. And he cited the International Criminal Court, the ICC, as his basis for this.
As if the ICC is, what, a branch office of the NYPD?
That's functionally how he treated it, as if it had local arrest authority that he, as mayor, could command.
It shows a breathtaking lack of understanding of diplomacy, of law, of everything. For our listeners who aren't legal experts, can you just break down exactly why a mayor can't do this?
Of course. First, the ICC is an international body. The jurisdiction to enforce any international warrants against foreign heads of state inside the United States resides solely with the federal government.
The executive branch, federal agency.
Exactly. The NYPD has absolutely no authority in that realm. Second, there's the concept of diplomatic immunity, which heads of state universally possess. That's controlled by federal law and international treaties. A municipal order can't just override that.
So his statement wasn't just, ambitious. It was fundamentally delusional. He was confusing his role as mayor with being, a world leader.
Legal experts, and we're talking about liberal-leaning former prosecutors here, they called the claim fantasy. One called it delusion wrapped in activism.
It wasn't just a political misstep.
No, it demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of the job he was running for. The mayor of New York is not the Secretary of State.
And this raises that crucial question of credibility. If a political leader is willing to say something so legally impossible just to get applause from his base...
What does that say about the other promises he's making?
Right. What does it say about his promises on rent control or transit funding or his tax revenue forecasts?
It creates a massive crisis of trust. And not just with investors, but with pragmatic voters. They look at a gaffe like that and they ask, if he'll ignore the structural limits of law for political fanfare, will he also ignore the structural limits of economics when it comes to the city budget?
This is what the sources mean when they suggest that these sorts of dreams collapse not from outside attacks, but from the inside, from incompetence.
From the inside rock of incompetence and self-delusion, at the end of the day, credibility matters, especially in finance.
Given the sheer volume of the capital flight and the scale of gaffes like that, you might think that the backlash is just happening in corporate boardrooms.
Right, that it's just Wall Street.
But the evidence suggests the resistance is now expanding far beyond that. It's affecting the very communities Mamdani claimed he was there to represent.
And this is the most compelling evidence that his whole approach has created a structural failure. The backlash is hitting Main Street now. It's extending into faith communities. It's shifting the allegiances of lifelong small business owners.
Let's start with the faith leaders.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing rabbis, pastors, imams, all stepping up with serious concerns.
And their critique is fascinating because it goes beyond just policy. It enters the realm of morality.
What are they saying?
They're warning their congregations that they don't want to be dragged into what they call socialist chaos. But more fundamentally, they're making a moral argument. They're stating that envy is not a virtue.
Wow.
It's a direct moral condemnation of the politics of resentment. They're arguing that Mamdani's policies are built on fueling class warfare and hostility, not on genuine charity or community. They see the demonization of success as corrosive to the social fabric.
And then you have the corporate reaction, which is predictable, but it hasn't been subtle. We're seeing open letters from CEOs.
Yes, and the common thread in their response is just simple economic philosophy. One Fortune 500 executive, who was quoted in the sources, put it perfectly. He said, "You can't demonize success and expect success to stick around."
It's an unavoidable mathematical reality.
It is. When you frame successful business people as the enemy, they just take their business and their tax revenue somewhere else. They choose environments where building something, creating jobs, is appreciated, not demonized as a moral failing.
And maybe the most surprising political shift here is among the small business groups. These are people who have historically been reliable Democratic voters.
Absolutely. This signals a fundamental change. Many of these small business owners, the people running restaurants, laundromats, small manufacturing sites, they've voted Democrat for decades.
Right.
But the source material is very clear. When their progressive political faith collides with their financial survival, they choose survival.
Have to.
They're quietly shifting their allegiance because Mamdani's promise to freeze rents and impose new labor mandates, it threatens their very existence. The shift From ideological loyalty to pure economic self-interest, it signals a profound failure in his coalition.
This all leads to this fundamental political cleavage that his rhetoric has exposed. Critics are framing it as this producers versus parasites divide.
That is the historical framing the sources are using. It's not a simple left versus right thing anymore.
No.
It's a deeper conflict between those who build things and those who seek to control the builders. Mamdani's rhetoric is fueled by resentment. We heard him target President Trump, and he used that same language against landlords, against business owners.
This tone, this aggression,
Yeah.
it leads directly to what critics are calling vengeance governing.
Exactly. His governing philosophy, as the investment community has interpreted it, is defined by vengeance against these perceived wrongdoers. He promised to end the corruption of billionaires. But the translation of that is,
Anyone with ambition who generates a profit is now the enemy.
and they must be punished. It is textbook class war rhetoric. And the investment community has seen this movie before in every collapsing socialist regime in modern history.
And the result of governing by vengeance is, well, it's clear. $8.7 billion diverted to Florida and Texas, mid-size employers relocating, landlords halting new development.
He's accelerating the very decay he promised to solve. The irony is devastating. A city that was built by visionaries, by risk-takers, by world-class engineers is now being governed by vengeance and ideological rigidity.
And this is all happening while the rest of the country is experiencing something very different.
A stark contrast. The sources draw the sharpest possible line here. Mamdani is initiating this self-destruction at the local level at the exact same time President Trump is steering a booming national economy.
One built on deregulation and tax stability.
It is the ultimate cautionary tale. While Florida and Texas and Tennessee are thriving under policies that favor growth, New York, under Mamdani's attempted revolution, is burning its own economic future for ideological applause.
When you punish the producers, when you trade economic freedom for political fantasy,
You end up losing both.
and the mathematical reality of it all, it's just inescapable. No matter how popular the socialist playbook is with certain groups, you cannot build socialism on a shrinking tax base.
You cannot. You can't freeze rents when the landlords are going bankrupt and defaulting on their loans. You can't run free buses when the tax routes are empty and the operational budget is in free fall.
We're seeing this collapse happen in real time.
We are. Commercial property vacancies are rising. Rental applications from new businesses are dropping. The companies that have stayed are quietly trimming their payrolls, just waiting for the inevitable tax hike to come.
Mamdani wanted a revolution. But what he's getting isn't a new golden age for the worker,
No, he's getting an evacuation.
a mass evacuation.
Thank you. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for this in-depth analysis.
That's all for this deep dive,
Mm.
but it leaves us with one haunting question. If the guardians of the rules, both legal and economic, are the first to break them, who is left to protect the game?